Don't let them think we're a couple tonight. Those were the exact words my wife Marta whispered to me as we walked into the sleek downtown bar where her advertising agency was throwing their annual holiday party. I adjusted my tie, the only decent one I owned, and forced a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Sure thing, sweetheart, I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm that sailed right over her perfectly styled head. Wouldn't want anyone to get the crazy idea that we're actually married. Marta shot me a warning look, her green eyes flashing with irritation. She looked stunning in her black cocktail dress, the one that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Everything about her screamed success, from her designer heels to her platinum jewelry. Meanwhile, I felt like a grease monkey playing dress-up, which wasn't far from the truth. My name is Danny Sullivan, and I own a classic car restoration garage on the south side of town. It's honest work, dirty work, and I'm damn good at it. But in Marta's world of corporate advertising and six-figure deals, I might as well have been invisible. The bar buzzed with conversation and fake laughter. Marta's colleagues clustered around high-top tables, nursing overpriced cocktails and discussing campaigns and client acquisitions. I recognized a few faces from previous company events. Jake Morrison from Creative, Nicole Chen from HR, and several others whose names I'd never bothered to learn. Danny, right? A voice beside me made me turn. It was Mrs. Kavanaugh, the agency's owner and Marta's boss. She was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. You're in automotive restoration, if I remember correctly. That's right, I said, surprised she remembered. Classic cars mostly, Mustangs, Camaros, that sort of thing. Fascinating work. There's something honest about bringing old things back to life, don't you think? Before I could respond, I heard Marta's laugh from across the room. She was talking to a group of her coworkers, and I caught fragments of her conversation. Oh, Danny? He's just a friend who needed a +1 tonight. My jaw clenched. Just a friend. We'd been married for 8 years, and I was just a friend. Honestly, I'm basically single these days. Work keeps me so busy. Mrs. Kavanaugh followed my gaze and frowned. Interesting, she murmured, more to herself than to me. I watched as Jake Morrison, tall, handsome, and everything I wasn't, moved closer to my wife. His hand brushed her arm as he leaned in to whisper something that made her giggle like a schoolgirl. The same giggle she used to save for me, back when we were actually happy. You know, Mrs. Kavanaugh said quietly, I've been in this business for 30 years. You learn to read people, to see what's really going on beneath the surface. And what do you see? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I see a woman who's forgotten what's important, and a man who's been underestimated for far too long. The evening dragged on. I nursed a beer while Marta worked the room, playing the part of the successful, single executive. Every so often, she'd glance my way with a look that clearly said, "Don't embarrass me." Jake never left her side, and the way they looked at each other made my stomach turn. Around 10 o'clock, Mrs. Kavanaugh clinked her glass with a spoon, calling for attention. The room gradually quieted as all eyes turned to her. Thank you all for coming tonight, she began. This has been an exceptional year for our agency, and it's thanks to the hard work and dedication of our team. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. But tonight, I have a special announcement, she continued, her eyes finding mine across the room. As many of you know, we've been looking for ways to expand our services and reach new markets. I'm pleased to announce that we've brought on a new partner, someone who brings a fresh perspective and valuable expertise to our organization. Marta beamed, probably thinking this was about her upcoming promotion. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet our new co-owner, Danny Sullivan. The room fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the polished concrete floor. Every face turned toward me, expressions ranging from confusion to shock. But the look on Marta's face, pure, undiluted horror, made every penny I'd spent worth it. Danny has invested significantly in our company, Mrs. Kavanaugh continued smoothly, and will be taking an active role in our operations moving forward. I think you'll find his practical experience and business acumen to be valuable assets. I raised my beer bottle in a mock toast. Thanks for the warm welcome, everyone. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. Marta's face had gone from pale to red to pale again. Jake looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. The rest of the room buzzed with whispered conversations and confused murmurs. Mrs. Kavanaugh walked over to me, extending her hand. Welcome aboard, partner. I shook her hand firmly. Pleasure doing business with you. As the shock began to wear off, people started approaching me with congratulations and questions. but my eyes stayed fixed on Marta, who was frantically whispering to Jake in the corner. Their body language screamed panic, and I felt a dark satisfaction spreading through my chest. "Let's put all the cards on the table, shall we?" I said quietly, though my words carried across the suddenly quiet room. The ride home was silent except for the hum of my truck's engine. Marta stared out the passenger window, her jaw tight with barely contained rage. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how I'd pulled this off. "How?" she finally asked as we pulled into our driveway. "How what?" I kept my voice casual, enjoying her frustration. "Don't play dumb, Danny. How did you buy into the company? We don't have that kind of money." I killed the engine and turned to face her. "We don't. I do." Her eyes widened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've been saving and investing for years while you've been spending money on designer clothes and expensive lunches. It means I sold my father's vintage Corvette collection last month. And it means I know a lot more about our finances than you think." We walked into the house in tense silence. Marta kicked off her heels and poured herself a large glass of wine. Her hands shook slightly as she lifted it to her lips. "You had no right," she said finally. "No right to invest in my wife's company, no right to secure our financial future." I loosened my tie and sat down across from her. "Or no right to interfere with whatever game you're playing with Jake Morrison." The wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really, because from where I was standing tonight, it looked like you were doing everything possible to convince people you're single." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? When's the last time you wore your wedding ring to work, Marta?" Her hand instinctively moved to her left ring finger, which was conspicuously bare. I take it off sometimes. It gets in the way when I'm typing." "Right. And I suppose that's why you changed your Facebook status to 'It's Complicated' 3 months ago." The color drained from her face. "You've been checking my social media?" "I've been paying attention to my wife, something I should have done a long time ago." Marta set down her wine glass and crossed her arms. "So what is this? Some kind of revenge plot?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "This is me taking control of my life. I'm tired of being treated like an accessory, Marta. Tired of being introduced as just a friend while you flirt with your coworkers. Jake and I are just what? Just friends? Just coworkers? Just having an affair?" The accusation hung in the air between us. Marta's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's insane. You're being paranoid." "Am I? Then you won't mind if I look through your phone." "Absolutely not. That's a violation of privacy." "Privacy." I laughed bitterly. "That's rich, coming from someone who's been lying to everyone about her marital status." Marta stood up abruptly. "I'm not doing this tonight. I'm going to bed." "Good idea. You'll want to be well rested for work tomorrow. I'm sure it'll be an interesting day." She paused at the bottom of the stairs. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means things are going to be different from now on. You wanted to pretend we're not married? Fine. But you might want to remember that your new business partner doesn't owe you any special favors." The next morning, I arrived at the agency before anyone else. Mrs. Kavanaugh had given me a key and the security codes, along with access to the company's financial records and employee files. It was amazing what you could learn about people when you had the right access. Marta's file made for interesting reading. Her salary was higher than I'd thought, but her performance reviews were mixed. Several clients had complained about missed deadlines and poor communication. There were also notes about excessive personal phone calls and unexplained absences. Jake Morrison's file was even more revealing. He'd been written up twice for inappropriate workplace behavior, including a complaint from a female intern about unwanted advances. His work quality had declined significantly over the past 6 months, right around the time his relationship with Marta had intensified. I was reviewing marketing budgets when employees started arriving. Through the glass walls of my new office, formerly a conference room, I watched their reactions. Some tried to hide their curiosity, while others whispered openly about the previous night's announcement. Marta arrived at 9:15, 15 minutes late. She'd clearly spent extra time on her appearance, probably trying to project confidence she didn't feel. She glanced toward my office, but didn't acknowledge me. Around 10 o'clock, Mrs. Kavanaugh knocked on my door. "How are you settling in?" she asked. "Fine. I've been reviewing some of the account files. Interesting reading." "I'm sure. Any initial observations?" I gestured to the stack of folders on my desk. "A few. It seems like there might be some communication issues between certain team members. Some projects have been falling behind schedule." Mrs. Kavanaugh nodded knowingly. "I've noticed that too. Perhaps we should schedule some one-on-one meetings with the staff. Get a fresh perspective on things." "I think that's a great idea. Should we start with the creative team?" Absolutely. Why don't you begin with Jake Morrison? He's been struggling lately. I smiled. I'll set something up for this afternoon. After Mrs. Kavanaugh left, I spent some time observing the office dynamics. Marta and Jake were clearly trying to act normal, but their body language gave them away. They avoided eye contact, kept their distance, and looked nervous whenever they thought someone was watching. At lunch, I decided to take a walk around the building. In the parking garage, I found Jake's car, a flashy red BMW that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. It was the kind of car that screamed, "Look at me," which seemed to fit Jake's personality perfectly. I walked around the vehicle slowly, admiring the pristine paint job and expensive modifications. Then I noticed something interesting. The valve caps on his tires were loose. Very loose. In fact, they were so loose that with just a small adjustment, the air would slowly leak out of his tires. I looked around to make sure no one was watching, then quickly loosened each valve cap just enough to cause a slow leak. By the time Jake left work, he'd have 4 flat tires and no idea why. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the car, then sent it to the number I'd found in Marta's contact list under Jake Work. The message was simple. Nice car, hope nothing happens to it. Back in the office, I watched through my window as Jake checked his phone. His face went white, and he immediately looked around the office until his eyes found mine. I gave him a friendly wave and went back to my paperwork. The afternoon meeting with Jake was scheduled for 3 o'clock. He knocked on my door precisely on time, looking like a man walking to his execution. "Come in, Jake. Have a seat." He sat down stiffly, his hands clasped in his lap. "Mrs. Kavanaugh said you wanted to discuss my recent projects." "Among other things?" I leaned back in my chair and studied him. Up close, he was younger than I'd thought, probably early 30s. Good-looking in a generic, corporate way. The kind of guy who'd never had to work hard for anything in his life. "Your performance reviews have been concerning," I continued. "Missed deadlines, client complaints, attendance issues. Care to explain?" Jake shifted uncomfortably. "It's been a challenging period. I've had some personal issues that have affected my work." "Personal issues. I see. Would these issues have anything to do with my wife?" The question hit him like a physical blow. His mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to speak. I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do, Jake. You're sleeping with Marta. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" That's not true. Marta and I are just colleagues." I pulled out my phone and showed him the picture I'd taken of his car. "Funny thing about colleagues, Jake. They usually don't exchange personal photos and flirty text messages." His eyes widened. How did I get access to company communications? I'm a co-owner now, remember? I have access to everything." That wasn't entirely true. I'd actually found the messages on Marta's phone while she was in the shower that morning, but Jake didn't need to know that. "Look," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Whatever you think is happening, I know exactly what's happening. The question is whether you want to handle this quietly or if you'd prefer I make it a public matter." Jake's face had gone from pale to green. "What do you want?" "I want you to stay away from my wife. I want you to focus on your work and stop treating this office like your personal dating service. And I want you to remember that your job, your entire career, depends on keeping me happy." I stood up and walked around the desk until I was standing directly in front of him. Even sitting down, Jake seemed to shrink away from me. "Do we understand each other?" He nodded quickly. Yes, we understand each other." "Good. Oh, and Jake, you might want to check your tires before you drive home tonight." As Jake hurried out of my office, I felt a dark satisfaction spreading through my chest. This was just the beginning. Marta and her lover had no idea what they were dealing with. But as I watched Jake practically sprint toward the elevators, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're playing with fire. You don't know everything." I stared at the message, my satisfaction quickly turning to unease. Someone else was watching. Someone else knew about the affair. The game had just gotten more complicated. That evening, I sat in my garage workshop, trying to focus on rebuilding a carburetor for a 1967 Mustang. The familiar smell of motor oil and the weight of tools in my hands usually calmed me, but tonight my mind kept racing. Who had sent that text? What didn't I know? My phone buzzed again. This time it was Marta. "Working late. Don't wait up." "Working late. Right." I checked the time, 7:30 p.m. I grabbed my keys and drove to the office building. Marta's car was in the parking garage, but the office floors were dark. I called the front desk. "Hi, this is Danny Sullivan, one of the agency owners. Could you tell me if anyone's still in the building?" "Let me check the keycard logs, sir." No, everyone signed out by 6:30. So where was my wife? I drove around downtown until I spotted her car parked outside Marcello's, an upscale Italian restaurant. Through the window, I could see Marta and Jake at a corner table, leaning close together, sharing what looked like a very intimate dinner. I took photos with my phone, then drove home to wait. Marta came home at 11:47 p.m., reeking of wine and expensive cologne. Cologne I definitely didn't wear. "How was work?" I asked from the living room couch. She jumped, clearly not expecting me to be awake. "Oh, you scared me. It was busy. Very busy." "Must have been. That's a long day, even for you." "Yes, well, we had a crisis with the Henderson account. Had to work through dinner." I nodded sympathetically. "That's tough. Did you at least get something to eat?" "Just grabbed a sandwich at my desk." Lie number 1. I'd seen her enjoying what looked like lobster ravioli. "Well, you should get some rest. Big day tomorrow." As she headed upstairs, I noticed she was walking more carefully than usual. Too much wine with her work dinner. The next morning, I arrived at the office early again. This time, I had a specific mission. I'd done some research on Nicole Chen, the HR manager who seemed to know everyone's business. According to her employee file, she'd been passed over for promotion 3 times in the past 2 years. Each time, Marta had been involved in the decision. I found Nicole in the break room, making coffee. "Morning, Nicole. Mind if I join you?" She looked surprised, but nodded. "Of course, Mr. Sullivan. How are you adjusting to the new role?" "Please, call me Danny, and I'm adjusting well, thanks. Actually, I was hoping to get your perspective on something." I poured myself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter casually. "I've been reviewing personnel files, and I noticed you've been with the company for 6 years. That's impressive loyalty." Nicole's smile was tight. "I believe in the company's mission." "And yet, despite your dedication and qualifications, you've been overlooked for several promotions. That must be frustrating." Her composure slipped slightly. "Sometimes these things take time. Or sometimes people play politics instead of recognizing talent." I let that hang in the air for a moment. "And I'm curious about the office dynamics here. As an outsider, I'm trying to understand how things really work." Nicole glanced around to make sure we were alone. "What do you mean?" "Well, for instance, I've noticed some interesting relationships between coworkers. Relationships that might affect professional judgment." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You mean Marta and Jake?" "Among others. How long has that been going on?" Nicole hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "About 8 months. It started at the company retreat in Aspen. They've been very careful, but—" She shrugged. "HR sees everything eventually." "And you haven't reported it?" "I've documented it, but Mrs. Kavanaugh said she'd handle it internally. Then suddenly Marta's being considered for a senior position, and Jake gets assigned to all the high-profile accounts." I could hear the bitterness in her voice. This woman had been watching her career stagnate while my wife slept her way to success. "That doesn't seem fair," I said quietly. "It's not. But what can I do? Marta has connections, influence. I'm just HR." "Maybe that's about to change. I'm going to need someone I can trust to help me understand the real dynamics here. Someone who knows where the bodies are buried, so to speak." Nicole studied my face carefully. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing we help each other. You provide me with information about what's really been going on, and I make sure your contributions to this company are properly recognized." "And Marta?" "Marta will get exactly what she deserves." That afternoon, Nicole sent me an email with several attachments. The subject line read, "Personnel matter, confidential." The attachments were devastating. Email records showing Marta and Jake using company resources for personal communications, expense reports for client dinners that were actually romantic dates, time-stamped keycard records showing them staying late together in empty offices. But the most damaging evidence was a series of emails between Marta and Jake discussing their relationship and making disparaging comments about other employees, including me. In one particularly brutal exchange, Marta had written, "Danny's so clueless, he actually thinks I'm working late, as if I'd waste my time on his pathetic little garage when I could be with you." Jake's response was equally charming. "When are you going to leave him? I'm tired of sneaking around. You deserve better than some grease monkey." I printed everything and made copies. Then I forwarded selected emails to several key people in the company, including Mrs. Kavanaugh, but I was careful to make it look like an accidental reply-all situation. Within an hour, the office was buzzing with gossip. People clustered in small groups, whispering and pointing. Marta and Jake looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Mrs. Kavanaugh called an emergency meeting for 4 p.m. "It has come to my attention," she began, "that certain employees have been conducting personal relationships on company time and using company resources for non-business purposes. This is unacceptable and will not be tolerated." She looked directly at Marta and Jake. "Effective immediately, both parties involved will be placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation." Marta shot to her feet. "This is ridiculous. You can't." "I can and I will. You'll receive a call from HR about the investigation process. Until then, please clean out your desks and surrender your keycards." As security escorted them out, Marta caught my eye. The look she gave me could have melted steel, but I just smiled and gave her a little wave. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "Impressive, but you're still not seeing the whole picture." I was getting tired of these cryptic messages. I texted back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Someone who knows what really happened in Aspen. Meet me at Murphy's Bar on 5th Street, 8 p.m. Come alone." I stared at the phone. This was either a trap or someone with information I needed. Either way, I had to know what I was dealing with. At 7:55 p.m., I walked into Murphy's Bar. It was a dive bar on the wrong side of downtown, the kind of place where people went to disappear. I ordered a beer and waited. At exactly 8 p.m., a woman approached my table. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with short blonde hair and nervous eyes. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm Amy Porter. I used to work at your wife's company." I gestured for her to sit. "Used to work there?" "I was Jake's assistant until 3 months ago. I quit after—" She took a shaky breath. "After what happened in Aspen." "What happened in Aspen?" Amy looked around nervously, then leaned forward. "Your wife and Jake weren't just having an affair. They were stealing client proposals and selling them to Morrison and Associates, our biggest competitor." The blood drained from my face. "What?" "Jake's brother works there. They've been feeding him information for months. Campaign strategies, client lists, budget numbers, everything." "Do you have proof?" Amy pulled out a flash drive. "Email records, financial transactions, everything. I copied it all before I left." "Why didn't you report this?" "To who?" Jake had convinced everyone I was just a disgruntled employee. And Marta, she made it clear that if I said anything, she'd make sure I never worked in advertising again. I took the flash drive, my mind racing. Corporate espionage was a felony. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about serious criminal activity. "Why are you telling me this now?" Amy smiled grimly. "Because I want to watch them burn. And because someone needs to stop them before they destroy the whole company." As I drove home, my phone rang. It was Marta. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Meet me at the house in 20 minutes. When I arrived, I found Marta pacing in the living room like a caged animal. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, her makeup smeared. "You did this," she said the moment I walked in. "You set us up." "I didn't have to set you up. You did that all by yourself." "Don't play innocent with me, Danny. The emails, the investigation, this has your fingerprints all over it." I sat down calmly. "The emails were your own words, Marta. I just made sure the right people saw them." "You bastard! Do you have any idea what you've done? My career is ruined." "Your career was ruined the moment you decided to betray your company and your husband." She stopped pacing and stared at me. "What do you mean, betray the company?" I smiled coldly. "I know about Morrison and Associates. I know about the stolen proposals. I know everything." The color drained from her face. That's impossible." "Is it? Did you really think no one would notice? Did you think you were smarter than everyone else?" Marta sank into a chair, her defiance crumbling. "How long have you known?" "Long enough. The question now is what happens next. What do you want?" I leaned forward. "I want you to understand that your little game is over. I want you to realize that actions have consequences, and I want you to know that this is just the beginning." My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Kavanaugh. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. We need to discuss the Morrison situation." I showed Marta the message. "Looks like tomorrow's going to be a very interesting day." As I headed upstairs, leaving my wife sitting alone in the wreckage of her schemes, I felt a grim satisfaction. But I also knew this was far from over. The real confrontation was still coming. The emergency board meeting was set for 9 a.m., but I arrived at the office at 7 to prepare. Mrs. Kavanaugh was already there, along with the company's lawyer and 2 men I didn't recognize. "Danny," Mrs. Kavanaugh said, I'd like you to meet Detective Morrison from the Corporate Crimes Unit and Mr. Phillips, our insurance investigator. My stomach dropped. Detective Morrison? Any relation to... Jake Morrison is my nephew, the detective said grimly, which is why I've recused myself from the investigation. Detective Santos will be handling the case. A woman in her 40s stepped forward. I'm Detective Santos. We understand you have information about corporate espionage. I handed over the flash drive Amy had given me. This contains evidence of stolen client information being sold to Morrison and Associates. The theft has been going on for at least 8 months. Detective Santos plugged the drive into her laptop and began reviewing the files. Her expression grew darker with each document. This is extensive, she said finally. We're looking at multiple felony charges. Theft of trade secrets, wire fraud, conspiracy. The financial damages alone are in the hundreds of thousands. Mrs. Kavanaugh shook her head. I trusted them. Both of them. There's more, I said. I believe they were planning to leave and take several major clients with them. There are emails discussing a timeline for their departure. The insurance investigator looked up from his notes. This could void several of our policies if we can prove the company was aware of the risk. We weren't aware, Mrs. Kavanaugh said sharply. If we had been, we would have acted immediately. At 9 a.m., the board members began arriving. Along with Mrs. Kavanaugh and myself, there were 3 external board members, all successful business people who took corporate governance seriously. Marta and Jake arrived at 9:15, escorted by their lawyers. They looked like they hadn't slept. Jake's usual confidence was gone, replaced by nervous energy. Marta sat ramrod straight, trying to project strength she clearly didn't feel. Mrs. Kavanaugh called the meeting to order. We're here to address serious allegations of misconduct and possible criminal activity by 2 employees. Jake's lawyer immediately objected. My client denies any wrongdoing and requests that this matter be handled through proper legal channels. It will be, Detective Santos said, entering the conference room. Both Mr. Morrison and Mrs. Sullivan are under arrest for corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets. The room erupted. Marta shot to her feet, her face white with shock. This is insane. You can't... You have the right to remain silent, Detective Santos continued, producing handcuffs. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As the detective read them their rights, I watched my wife's world collapse. 8 years of marriage, and it had come to this, watching her get arrested for betraying everything she claimed to care about. But as they led her away, Marta turned to me with pure hatred in her eyes. This isn't over, she hissed. You think you've won, but you have no idea what's coming. After they were gone, the board met in emergency session. The financial damage was worse than we'd initially thought. Morrison and Associates had used our stolen information to undercut our bids on 6 major accounts, costing us nearly $2 million in lost revenue. We need to consider our options, one board member said. The company's reputation is at stake. Mrs. Kavanaugh looked exhausted. What do you recommend? Full transparency. We cooperate completely with law enforcement, conduct an internal audit, and implement new security protocols. We also need to consider civil action to recover damages. I spoke up. I have a suggestion. What if we turn this into a positive? Show our clients that we take security seriously, that we're willing to hold ourselves accountable. Go on, Mrs. Kavanaugh said. We issue a public statement explaining what happened and what we're doing to prevent it in the future. We offer affected clients compensation or additional services. We turn this betrayal into proof of our integrity. The board voted unanimously to pursue that strategy. Over the next few days, the story dominated local business news. Advertising executive arrested for corporate espionage. Wife betrays husband's company in elaborate theft scheme. The headlines were brutal, and Marta's professional reputation was destroyed overnight. But the most satisfying moment came 3 days later when I received a call from Morrison and Associates. Mr. Sullivan, this is Robert Morrison. I understand you're now a co-owner of Kavanaugh and Associates. That's correct. I'm calling to discuss a possible settlement. We're prepared to offer compensation for any misunderstandings that may have occurred. Misunderstandings? I laughed. Mr. Morrison, your company engaged in systematic theft of our intellectual property. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a crime. Perhaps we could meet to discuss this privately. I don't think so. You'll be hearing from our lawyers. That afternoon, Mrs. Kavanaugh called me into her office. I have news about the criminal case. Jake has agreed to testify against Marta in exchange for a reduced sentence. I wasn't surprised. Jake had always been weak, and prison time would terrify someone like him. What about Marta? Her lawyer is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor isn't interested. They want to make an example of this case. That evening, I was working late in my garage when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the window, I saw Marta getting out of a taxi. She was out on bail, but the conditions were strict. No contact with Jake, no access to company property, and surrender of her passport. She knocked on the garage door. "Danny, we need to talk." I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "What do you want, Marta?" She looked terrible. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her hair unwashed. The confident executive was gone, replaced by a desperate woman facing prison time. "I want to explain," she said. "Explain what? How you stole from the company? How you lied to me for months? How you destroyed everything we built together? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Jake said it would be simple, just a few client lists, some market research. We needed seed money to start our own agency. So you decided to steal it. We were going to pay it back. Once our agency was successful, we would have... You would have what? Magically made it all better." I shook my head. "You're delusional, Marta. You committed serious crimes, and now you're going to face the consequences." She stepped closer, and I could smell alcohol on her breath. "You could make this go away. You have influence now. You could talk to Mrs. Kavanaugh, convince her to drop the charges." "Why would I do that?" "Because despite everything, I'm still your wife. Because we had 8 good years before this happened. Because you love me." I stared at her for a long moment. "I did love you. But the woman I loved wouldn't have done what you did. She wouldn't have betrayed her company, her husband, and everything she claimed to believe in." Tears started flowing down her cheeks. "Please, Danny. I'm begging you. I can't go to prison. I won't survive it." "You should have thought about that before you decided to become a criminal." I started to close the garage door, but she grabbed my arm. "Wait, there's something else you need to know. About Nicole." "What about Nicole?" "She's not innocent in this. She knew about the theft from the beginning. She was getting paid to look the other way." I studied her face, trying to determine if this was another lie. "You're just trying to drag someone else down with you." "I'm telling the truth. Check her bank records. Morrison and Associates has been paying her through a consulting company. She's the one who gave us access to the secure files. If this was true, it changed everything. Nicole had played me perfectly, positioning herself as an ally while orchestrating the entire scheme. Why should I believe you? Because I have nothing left to lose. Because destroying Nicole won't help my case. It'll just prove how deep this conspiracy went." I called Detective Santos the next morning and shared Marta's allegation. Within hours, they had a warrant for Nicole's financial records. The investigation revealed that Nicole had indeed been receiving payments from Morrison and Associates, disguised as consulting fees for a shell company. She'd been the inside source, providing access codes and sensitive information while maintaining the appearance of loyalty. When they arrested Nicole at the office, she broke down completely. She confessed to everything, explaining how Jake's brother had approached her months ago with an offer she couldn't refuse, $50,000 to help them access confidential files. "I was drowning in student loans," she sobbed to Detective Santos. "My mother needed surgery, and insurance wouldn't cover it. They offered me a way out." But her cooperation had gone far beyond simply providing information. She'd actively helped cover up the theft, manipulating HR records and deleting security logs. She'd even helped plan Marta and Jake's exit strategy. The revelation hit me hard. I'd thought I was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, but Nicole had been manipulating me from the beginning. Every piece of information she'd given me, every alliance she'd offered, it had all been calculated to protect herself and eliminate her co-conspirators. Mrs. Kavanaugh was devastated. I trusted her completely. She had access to everything: employee records, financial data, strategic plans. There's no telling how much damage she's done. The final board meeting was held 2 weeks later. All 3 conspirators had been convicted and sentenced. Jake received 18 months in federal prison after his cooperation. Nicole got 2 years. Marta, as the ringleader who refused to cooperate, received 4 years. "The company has survived," Mrs. Kavanaugh announced to the board. "We've recovered most of the stolen assets, implemented new security protocols, and actually gained several new clients who were impressed by our transparency in handling the crisis." She looked at me across the conference table. "Danny, your instincts and investigation were crucial to exposing this conspiracy. I'm recommending that the board approve your promotion to full partner." The vote was unanimous. That evening, I sat in my garage, working on the Mustang carburetor I'd abandoned weeks ago. Everything was quiet. No more mysterious texts, no more lies, no more betrayals. Just the honest work of rebuilding something that had been broken. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, my heart raced, but then I read the message. Saw the news about your wife. Sorry for your loss. If you ever want to sell that '67 Mustang, call me. Pete from the car show. I smiled and went back to work. Some things, once broken, could be rebuilt stronger than before. Others were better left in the past. 6 months later, Kavanaugh and Sullivan Associates was thriving. We'd expanded into 3 new markets and hired a dozen new employees. I'd moved out of the suburban house I'd shared with Marta and bought a small place near my garage, with a 3-car workshop and room for my growing collection of classic cars. Mrs. Kavanaugh, Margaret, as she insisted I call her now, had become not just a business partner, but a trusted friend. She'd taught me about the advertising world, while I'd brought practical business sense and a healthy skepticism about people's motives. You know, she said one afternoon as we reviewed quarterly reports, I never told you why I really brought you into the company. I looked up from the financial statements. I assumed it was because you needed capital investment. She shook her head. We had other options for funding. I brought you in because I could see what was happening with Marta and Jake, but I needed someone on the inside to help expose it. You used me. I gave you the tools to save your marriage and your wife's career. She chose to destroy both. I thought about that for a moment. So the whole thing, the partnership offer, the company party announcement, that was all planned. The partnership offer was real. I genuinely believe you're a valuable addition to this company. But the timing, yes, that was strategic. And if Marta had been innocent, then you would have had a successful business investment and a stronger marriage. Win-win. I had to admire her pragmatism. Margaret Kavanaugh hadn't built a successful company by being naive about human nature. Any regrets? She asked. I considered the question seriously. My marriage was over, my wife was in federal prison, and my entire life had been turned upside down. But I was also financially secure, professionally successful, and free from the constant stress of living with someone who'd been systematically betraying me. No, I said finally. No regrets. That evening, I was closing up the garage when a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. It was Amy Porter, the former assistant who'd provided the evidence that brought down the conspiracy. Hi, Mr. Sullivan. I hope you don't mind me stopping by. Not at all. How are you doing? She smiled. Much better, thanks to you. I got a job with Henderson and Associates. They were impressed that I'd had the courage to expose the theft. That's great news. I wanted to thank you for believing me, for taking action. I know it couldn't have been easy, learning what your wife had done. I nodded. It wasn't, but it was necessary. Amy hesitated, then said, There's something else. I'm testifying at a congressional hearing next month about corporate espionage. They want to use this case as an example of how these crimes affect small businesses. That's important work. I was wondering, would you consider testifying as well, about the impact on your company, your employees? I thought about it. The idea of reliving the whole experience in front of Congress wasn't appealing, but if it could help prevent other companies from going through the same thing, send me the details. I'll consider it. After Amy left, I stood in my garage, surrounded by the tools and projects that had always been my refuge. The '67 Mustang was nearly finished. Engine rebuilt, body restored, everything working the way it was supposed to. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I'd stopped being paranoid about mysterious calls. Danny Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, this is Sarah Chen from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're investigating a related case involving Morrison and Associates, and we'd like to speak with you about your experience. Related case? It appears the scheme involving your wife was part of a larger pattern. We've identified at least 6 other companies that were targeted using similar methods. I sank into a chair. Even now, months later, the scope of the betrayal was still expanding. What do you need from me? Your testimony, your evidence, and your expertise. You've become something of an expert on corporate espionage, whether you intended to or not. As I hung up the phone, I realized that my story wasn't really over. It was evolving into something larger, a cautionary tale about trust, betrayal, and the importance of paying attention to the people closest to you. But for now, I had work to do. I picked up my tools and went back to rebuilding the Mustang's engine. Some things I'd learned were worth the effort to make them run perfectly again. Others were better left broken. At her company party, my wife had said, "Do not let them think we are a couple." She'd gotten her wish. We weren't a couple anymore. We weren't anything anymore. And I was perfectly fine with that.